Hello and welcome, Susan ma'am. Uh, for those of you watching, I have known Susan ma'am, I think, for the last 8, 9 years, and one of the persons who has greatly influenced me in my journey. So thank you so much for joining us and doing this at such a short notice, ma'am. What I really want to understand from you is that children spend a lot more time in the school than they do at home, and the kind of environment they get at school from the teachers, from the students, really impacts them in a big way. Can schools create some kind of an ecosystem which kind of intrinsically builds those values in the students?
Thank you, Rohit, for having me on the program. And coming back to your question, the school system, so to speak, I don't know what kind of a normal we are going to have once school reopens with the pandemic on just now. So the kind of normal that we have that you're talking about is a little difficult to find when school reopens and whenever it reopens. But yes, I think one of the things that a school can do in order to make sure that what we are trying to see is that they look at, I won't even look at it as an environment conservation. I will look at it as an environment and sustainability, how they can make themselves sustainable, how they can make their habits sustainable, and thus in the process make sure that the environment itself is sustainable. See, unless we make a habit in the children are never going to learn. Like, the children have learned how to brush their teeth, they know how to use their spoon, how to use their plate, all how to put on their uniform. It's all become a habit for them. Similarly, I think the kind of habits that we inculcate in the school, whether it is segregating their waste, whether it is shutting off the tap, all these has to become a habit with them. And how do we do that? And I think, in fact, I have this at the foundation school where I was I've just retired from there. The school has a green policy, which is advertised, which is put into the school almanac itself. And this green policy is actually tied up with a program which they call as the citizenship program. All these things are entwined with the curriculum itself. It doesn't go as a separate subject. Somehow, even I feel it should not be done as a separate subject. It has to be embedded into the curriculum, woven into the curriculum.
I think I agree, man. So two important things that I learned from that is, one, it is important to create habits, and habits can be created at a very early age. And the way to create habits is for schools to incorporate a policy which actually speaks about environment and sustainability. So if it's a part of the policy itself, and the students see those elements around them every day, I think those habits can possibly get created on its own as well. The second question that comes to my mind is that, as a teacher, I could be a mathematics teacher or a English teacher or a social science teacher. How can I, as a teacher, incorporate these kind of elements into my daily lesson planning? Is there a way to do that, or is it only the job of an environmental teacher?
I don't agree with that at all. I think every educator needs to be bothered about the environment, and it is her responsibility to make sure that she makes her students also not only aware, but also imbibe good habits. So for that, in fact, in school, what we did is we used to come up with these cross-curricular lesson plans in which as one of the SDGs or two of the SDGs would be incorporated. If you think of the 17 SDGs, that is the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that are there, each one of them is linked to environment and sustainability. And if the teachers can incorporate one of them into their lesson plan, automatically your math as well as your history as well as your science, everything comes in. These are all workable because I know my students have done it. So I can speak with conviction that this is possible, and it has brought a change in the habit, in the thinking of the child. And that is exactly what we need to do. And that needs to be sustained right across their school years. Only then will they be able to take it forward.
Right. Perfect. And so I think, yeah, you're very right. So it should not be looked at as a job in isolation by a particular person, but as a complete uh, process wherein every stakeholder is involved. And I think that's the only way perhaps we will be able to inculcate the right values in our students and bring about a change. Well,
Including the
I
parents, including housekeeping staff at the school.
absolutely, yeah. As there's something that intrigues me a lot. We see people all around us. People talk about environment degradation, but somehow they're not ready to take action. So, in your experience as a teacher, what do you think there are any psychological blocks that that develop in our minds as we grow up that stops us from taking actions? And can these psychological blocks be opened up for a child, and therefore we can ensure that when a child grows up, he or she is a far more responsible citizen?
Yeah. See, blocks, yes. See, there are people. In fact, the other day I was looking at a little cartoon which said the problem that we have just now is the pandemic itself, and a bigger wave than the pandemic is the recession that is close at its heels, and bigger than that would be the climate change, which is linked to your environment as well as sustainability itself. So I would think that there are people, were a small section of society that were in climate change deniers, as we call them. So maybe you could call that as a psychological this thing. And plus this consumerism that is there among people, you kind of hold. But I think that way this pandemic would have brought about a little bit of a change in the habits of people is what I think, because this would have given them a little more time to think. I think that kind of a habit, certainly this lockdown and the pandemic would have created changes in people. See, the amount of consumerism that is there is so very high. Whether you need it or not, you go and buy things. Putting on an AC at 19 or 20 in the hot summer is something that is not acceptable. I mean, and these are things that we tell our children right in the beginning. And I think in the lower classes, the children are the best bet in order to make the adults change their mind about it. Adults which have a psychological block than the children. So if children can be convinced to do what they have to do and make it as a habit, I think they can change.
Ma'am, do you think the schools of today are ready to do this?
Let me tell you, the CBSE curriculum that is there has a big this thing of environment education there already. But we don't do it as environment education. We have that choice of putting it. And there are topics like food, water, natural resources. And into all of them, it's very easy to weave this in. And the new education policy very clearly talks about weaving in of sustainability vis-a-vis the SDG goals, which I think now the COVID has had an effect on the SDGs. We were supposed to have attained them by 2030. Now that time will go a little further, I suppose, because with the pandemic in this thing, the COVID has affected all the 17 goals. So I think this can be, is being done in most, I can talk definitely in Delhi schools and in the metros it's happening, but maybe in the semi-urban and the other schools, it takes place in a different manner.
I hope that more and more schools start adopting it. It's extremely crucial and extremely important for our next generation to inculcate those values and grow up to be a much more responsible citizen. I think more than anything else, we owe it to them. We cannot leave them behind with a world which they would not like to live in. So it's our prime responsibility, I believe. Even Aditya yesterday talked about this. I have also time and again talked about this, and you also mentioned it. I think it all comes down to responsible consumerism. If people can just be responsible about what they consume, how much they consume, I have a strong sense that you don't need to do anything else. Just be conscious about it, and rest of the things will take care of its own. And then before I leave you, I hope this video will be watched by a number of teachers and a number of students. So your one message to the teacher community and to our student community, what would that be?
And the student community, be the change that you want to see around you, and make sure that you come down down on your consumerism. Buy only what you need, and what you don't need, give it away. Make sure that you share what you do, because so that it doesn't reach the landfill. If you have any kind of biodegradable waste, learn to compost it at home so that you do not add to the landfill. We need to flatten our landfills and make sure that our environment is sustainable, by whether it is energy, whether it is water, all these things need to be looked after. Yes. And the responsibility lies as educators, as students, as human beings and caretakers of this planet. We need to do that.
Great, ma'am. Great. I think on the note of hope, I thank you from my heart for sparing your time and for sharing your thoughts around this. I believe these are very important. And as people are trying to find a new normal, if people can start incorporating the thoughts around sustainability right now, I believe a new normal could actually be a very beautiful normal. So, on that note, ma'am, thank you so much for doing this.